good morning to you. Welcome to the Morning Brief right here on Channels Television. It's the second day of the program for the week. I'm Jeffrey Osama, and as always, I'm with my people, as I like to call them. You know who they are, right?
Indeed, by now they know already. And June wears on already. And of course, we're also exerting efforts to make things better. Good morning and welcome to the Morning Brief. I am Bukola Koka.
Well, I'm Kaido Kikilu, and one thing you can count on us for is that we won't go on strike, because we'll report the strike to you, right? So we're here, live, direct from Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. Welcome to the show, guys.
Absolutely. So yesterday I was on the social media. I saw something that was quite painful to the heart, and for every patriotic Nigerian. And it made me think of the country in different ways. So, you know, the bridge, the second Niger bridge.
Right.
And I saw this gentleman who did a video. I don't know what it's called, technical term for it, but
the expansion joint.
Expansion joint. That's what it's called. It's just for expansion and contraction for heat, so that the bridge will stay as long as it should. And I saw that someone actually, whoever is this group of people, had removed one of those expansions. In fact, that was the second one they were removing. So what that means is that you are on this beautiful long stretch of the bridge, you're in high speed, and you don't know one of the expansion joints has been removed. So if your tires go on that removed part, the tire could blow up, depending on what is holding the expansion joint. And I'm wondering, why would you see such beautiful asset and remove it? So somebody removed it, somebody bought it. So it has to stop. It just doesn't make sense that government, yes, they receive a lot of flack. Yes, they don't perform as well as we do. But when they do some of those things that are for our collective good, I think the least we can do is to ensure we protect this asset, which brings me to the question of the issue of the police and the NSCDC. Things like that are the responsibility of the NSCDC. When the guy reported to, I think, the DPO of a particular station, they brought police. Those should not be police job. That should be the NSCDC's job eventually, because the president has promised that he's going to reform the police. Remove all these policemen, 150,000 of them out of 500, I understand, protecting VIPs, and replace them with NSCDC. You know, revamp the NSCDC to have the responsibility. How can we have less than 500,000 policemen and 30% are protecting a few individuals? And those assets are just, so I said it brought a lot of things to my mind, and I just felt like I just had to let it out. So if you're one of those stealing national assets, I don't even know what to say to you. But they will argue that the politicians are stealing the country dry at the top level, and you want to do your own at the lower level. But we must not all steal from ourselves.
Well, this is not the first time that we're hearing of such reports about vandalism on the second Niger Bridge, and in fact,
even on Third Mainland Bridge.
On Third Mainland Bridge, and also we've heard about vandalism on the fairly new project, Abuja-Kaduna rail line. And in fact, in the recent past, investigations have revealed that indeed it's a network or a kind of syndicate, and they have expatriates who are buyers who patronize them and purchase these things. And I believe that, you know, for anyone to be able to successfully vandalize that kind of infrastructure, that magnitude of infrastructure, they must have some technical expertise. And it behoves of the security operatives to carry out investigation that would provide leads to those who are enabling this, who are the buyers, who are those patronizing them, and of course expose them. Again, I reiterate, it takes some form of technical expertise to be able to vandalize such. Are there moles in those who make perhaps, you know, casual labor, whom federal government contractors employ, you know, to work on those infrastructure? Are there moles there, you know, who deploy the expertise, you know, for theft later on in the future? The security operatives must begin to think in that direction.
Absolutely. Well, by the look, sound, and everything around that video, it looks like the second Niger Bridge, but we've not been able to independently verify that video, but it's something that raises lots of issues. And speaking of that, the natural question will be, how is the strike going for Nigerians? Because the power has been cut, so it was a very, very painful night, I must say, and painful day for businesses who might still continue with that. That's on the one hand. You talk about the airport as well. And I understand that they might move to the international airport today. So there's a lot of uncertainty, literally crippling the economy. So it's not the very, very best of times, absolutely. But we do hope that we can ride this storm and come out on the other side. Jeffrey.
And learn from it too, Jeffrey.
Absolutely. So, hey, it's day 2, of course, of this issue that we're talking about. So, organized labor is apparently not backing down on their strike action over the wage dispute with the federal government. The best amount the government has so far put forward, although they say they will work on that, is 60,000 naira. Labor considers that number and that amount abysmal as government appeals for continuous negotiation. So, we'll continue the conversation on the thorny issue crippling the economy, as we've always maintained.
And speaking of the economy, in economics, action and inaction come with consequences. Whether the government agrees or refuses to shift ground on the debate of minimum wage, its impact is already being felt on the economy. As a matter of fact, we should be bringing out our calculator to know what the numbers are. But an expert joins us to provide insight and the possible dynamics going forward.
Well, you know who else joins us? You join us on the show, not just by watching us, by sending in your comments, questions, and videos as well. If you've got, we got loads of them yesterday, so keep them coming in today as well. Let us show the world what's happening around you, and I'm talking about how the strike is affecting you, how you're going about your business. So that is the golden number. That is how you can reach us, the quickest way to reach Bukola, Jeffrey, and Kayode on the show. So let us know what your thoughts are about the conversations we'll have today about the strike and anything happening around you. You can also do it on X, #CTV Morning Brief. So the seat is prepared. Have your seat, shall you?
Of course, negotiation continues today. Let's find out how that will play out. But hey, we'll bring you your top stories first, and we'll come back to have that conversation. Join us again. On the brief this morning, public offices and institutions remain shut nationwide following Monday's commencement of strike by organized labor over the minimum wage dispute. Although a late-night meeting between the labor and, of course, government could not stop the industrial action. However, agreement was reached to continue daily negotiations for the next week as government commits to shifting grounds beyond the 60,000 naira proposed as minimum wage. The government is said to have promised not to victimize workers for their action. The resolution was conveyed to journalists by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator George Akomere, in a meeting that had the Minister of Finance, Power, Budget and Economic Planning, State for Labor, including the President of the NLC and TUC, all in attendance. Now, prior to that meeting, the Nigeria Labour Congress and their trade union counterpart commenced their indefinite strike action after negotiations with the federal government deadlocked at the expiration of an ultimatum given by workers, which elapsed on June the 31st, when government proposed 60,000 naira against Labour's demand for over 400,000 naira from Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, Kano, Taraba to Imo, among other states. Members of the union ensure compliance as education, air travel, healthcare, electricity supply, among services disrupted, as workers also demand for a reversal of the hike in electricity tariff.
As you can see, we've locked the gates for people, staff that are under level 14. Level 14 and above are in there working. But we know that if you allow everybody in, there won't be any effect. So anybody below level 14 should go home. That's what we have done.
Have you ever seen in our House of Rep or House of Senate when they just raise up and sponsor a bill on behalf of workers? They will not. And they know we are the engine room for the money they were spending. But they will never sponsor any bill on our behalf.
Well, the strike is not against the government, it's a national directive, and we are duty bound to comply.
Let's speak today.
No, we need to talk to somebody.
The awareness must be there.
No, you enter and follow them. We need to talk to somebody. Take him to whoever that is in charge. We need to talk to somebody.
Well, that strike continues today. Meanwhile, students writing their final examination in secondary schools across the country may have nothing to worry about despite the strike action. That assurance is coming from the West African Examination Council, WAEC, who argued that a Nigerian child should not be a casualty of an industrial dispute as the examination is taking place simultaneously across the West African sub-region. WAEC, in a statement cited by one of his branch controller in Ekiti, Mrs. Ati Lawson, says although it shares the pain of the Nigerian workers, it directed school officials and parents to make adequate arrangement for their students to sit for the examination. Now, for a former governor of Ogun State and senator representing Ogun East, Senator Benga Daniel, it's an appeal to Nigerians to be patient with the Tinubu-led government amidst the challenging economic conditions which has triggered industrial action by the labor unions. The senator made the appeal when he paid a courtesy visit to Channels Television corporate headquarters in Lagos, where he also delved into the debate on whether or not to return Nigeria to regional government. He's promising to vote in support of the bill if it were to be presented before the Senate. Now, over 8 rescue students from Confluence University of Science and Technology, Osara in Kogi State, have been handed over to the state government by the military. Shortly before handing over the students at the Army headquarters in Abuja, the Deputy Chief of Operations, Major General Emmanuel Emeka, says the military remains determined to rescue all abducted Nigerians. On his part, the governor of Kogi State, Usman Ododo, assures residents of the state of their safety. The students who were taken hostage by terrorists on May the 9th, 2024 were rescued on June the 2nd by troops of the Nigerian Army.
At this level, I have come to realize that the Nigerian Army has all it takes to stamp out kidnapping, banditry, and all sorts of criminal activities from our land, because the level of synergy, level of understanding, collaboration, and coordination carried out by them professionally is highly commendable, and I sincerely appreciate you and your men. I want to promise that Kogi State will always be there to partner with you. You are ever ready to answer your call at any point in time. And fighting crime and criminality in our land, we are up to date. We have all it takes in terms of equipment. We will continue to collaborate as Nigerians with your agencies to make sure our land is free of all these criminalities.
So let's get back to our lead story. We told you that late last night, literally all of us journalists were waiting for that meeting between government and labor to see whether they will call off the strike or whether government will shift grounds. But there was an agreement signed and the negotiation continues today. But after the meeting, the secretary to the government of the Federation spoke to journalists. Let's take a listen to him.
After exhaustive deliberations and engagement by both parties, the following resolutions were reached. The President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, is committed to a national minimum wage that is higher than 60,000. Arising from the above, the tripartite committee is to meet every day for the next 1 week with a view to arriving at an agreeable national minimum wage. Labor, in deference to the high esteem of the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Federal Republic of Nigeria, is committed in paragraph 3 sub 2 above, and it takes to convene a meeting of its organs immediately to consider this commitment. And for no worker will be victimized as a result of the industrial action down in Abuja on the 3rd of June 2024. And this document is signed for the federal government by the Minister of Information and National Orientation and the Honorable Minister of State for Labor and Employment. For the organized labor, President Nigeria Labour Congress, President Trade Union Congress. Let me reassure Nigerians that we have had a very realistic and patriotic meeting, and the results will be very, very manifest soon. Thank you very much.
Well, so our eyes and ears are waiting for what will happen in the next 1 week based on that meeting, that resolution, that kind of agreement. But let's tell you that there is a mild unease in the financial sector following the central bank's decision to revoke the license of Heritage Bank with immediate effect. The Apex Bank cites the inability of the board and management of Heritage Bank to improve its financial performance, which constitutes a threat to the bank's financial stability. In a statement by the CBN, steps taken to reverse the poor financial fortune of the banks have failed, making a revocation of license inevitable in line with Section 12, subsection 1 of the Banks and other financial act, that's BOFIA 2020, due to the breach of the act. The central bank has now appointed the Nigeria Deposit Insurance Corporation, NDIC, as the liquidator of the bank in accordance with Section 12 of the act, and assures the public that the nation's financial system is in good stands. As this in business, Director General of the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, Ms. Adewale Smart Oyerinde, is concerned about the impact of acceding to labor's demands by government. Ms. Oyerinde, who was on our business program, believes that over 400,000 naira the union is asking for will cripple businesses in the country.
Now, what we are meant to recommend is a national minimum wage. It's very important to address that. The minimum wage below which no organization, either in the private or public sector, should pay. The wage ordinarily for the most vulnerable worker. It is not, the process is not to set a general wage increase. It is not. There has been conversations about living wage or there's no living wage. This particular committee that we have, it's set up to come up with recommendations for a new minimum wage. And for us, one of the key objectives is that we must protect jobs. Because if organized businesses continue to suffer the current situation, look, there's no way we can protect jobs. That is the basic reality of it. There's no way businesses can remain sustainable when the affordability becomes inquiry.
On the international scene, from an impeccable academic credentials to Mexico's top political job, Dr. Claudia Sheinbaum becomes the first woman and the first Jewish person to be elected president of the North American nation. Sheinbaum won around 60% of the vote in the largest election in Mexico's history, marking a historic achievement in the mostly Catholic country. She will be taking over from outgoing President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, a longtime ally whose social welfare programs lifted many Mexicans out of poverty, making their leftist Morena party favorites in the polls. A PSG record scorer and World Cup winner Kylian Mbappe is heading to the Bernabeu after signing a 5-year contract worth 15 million euros with Real Madrid. It's a free transfer after the Paris Saint-Germain captain left PSG. The 25-year-old, who has scored 256 goals in over 300 appearances, received a sign-on bonus of just over £85 million from Madrid, who will pay the fee by installments over the duration of the contract. Mbappe joins Real Madrid just 2 days after Carlo Ancelotti's side won the 15th Champions League title to claim the double, having also won the La Liga champions. Well, Well, those are the stories we've been tracking late last night, the last 24 hours, all the way to this morning, which will shape part of our conversation for the show and the rest of the day. Coyote joins me now to tell us what's been happening on Nat'l. What hit you the most?
What hit me the most is the elections. I think it's been said time and again that this is like the biggest election season globally this year. Just in the space of a few days, we've had elections in South Africa, India, the biggest election in the world is happening, and of course Mexico. So it's good to see what's
coming. Ghana is coming.
The US.
The US is coming.
So I think that the fate of the world sort of hangs in the balance in 2024, and we'll see how it plays out. But that's what's happening globally. Right here in Nigeria, it looks like our fate is also being decided of sorts with that industrial action which we've seen nationwide. If you've been able to avoid industrial actions, Jeffrey, I was thinking about this. If you've maybe gone to private school, so you avoided ASU, you go for private health, so you avoid the usual, you know, health workers strike. I bet you that you felt yesterday's strike. If you didn't lose power as a result of a power cut, you probably felt it at the airport, and the list goes on and on. Even in the judiciary, you must have felt it. So let's take a look at what Nigerians, well, okay, banks didn't go through that, so yeah, that didn't affect the banks. But let's take a look at what Nigerians...
Some banks are not close. I don't know.
Except Heritage Bank, but that was not a result of the strike.
No, that was an immediate directive from the CBN.
Exactly.
I even saw that some guys who went to play charity match in Uyo were stranded. Some celebrities, you know, they went
as a result of that.
Yes, they went to play for True Sekong charity. Right. So the likes of Fowles and the rest of them, they couldn't come back to Lagos. And I think this is what you call a strike, which is why the word crippling economy is used in this term. Because Labour is saying, I think we've talked too much. Let's get to work. And the government was quite wise to call them. But I'm wondering, what are you going to be discussing for a whole week?
I know, right?
I'm just wondering, what exactly are you talking about?
But at least we know what you are talking about regarding this strike. And let's start off from Captain Westwood on X. This is the first comment we're taking on the show this morning. And this is what this user has to say about Labour shutting down the national grid this time around. As at 2 a.m. On Monday, we understand that the national grid was shut. In fact, you'll have read TCN's statement. It was like explaining the whole situation. So take a look at this comment. It says that national assets such as these, and I think it's talking about the electricity sector, the transmission assets, can be sabotaged so easily is an indictment on our law enforcement. This user says fraternity. So you just understand what this user is going through to be able to use those terms. So believes it's an indictment on law enforcement. But is it really?
Well, so the workers are trying to make a statement. So the lawyers will be able to explain to us whether when industrial actions happen like this, whether they can approach the grid to shut it down because of the potential economic as well as security implication and all that. All right, Ignite here says, I hope after closing national grid, our past bills will not remain the same or even higher than what we've been paying for in previous months. I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, it's important to put these things out because there's a lot of trust deficit. This user is essentially just airing his or her concerns. This next one from Zoe Zefaria says, even when the grid is at 100%, do people have constant supply of electricity? That's a question. It should have a question mark, but this user puts an exclamation mark on this one. Says, why all this wailing? The same grid that shuts down anytime and anyhow. If Nigerians want governance or good governance, they need to be ready and make the sacrifice. So that's Zephyr on X putting up that particular comment.
Aye Dura 3 says, I'm not against the strike, but at least we should look at various perspectives. The fuel is high. Now no light. Doctors will be out from hospital, leaving people who are unwell to die. Students, future leaders will be out of school. All right.
Well, the fifth comment on this one is from Nigerian Noise, and it just says incredible. An entire country's national grid to be switched off by striking workers. Imagine for a moment the number of lives lost in hospitals with power to run life-saving machines. Then think of billions lost as businesses grind to a halt. This
all right. Says. At Boda Anjola says, I don't understand, honestly, is the strike supposed to affect the masses or push the government to attend to their request or to your request. You ask us not to go to work, but still take away the one thing that could make it easy for us to stay home. Maybe the Labour strategy here is you have to feel our heat, so they can also put the heat on the government to do something.
Whatever the case is, both sides have a lot of questions and explaining to them. I'm talking federal government and Labour. But let's turn our attention to the general effect of this strike, shutting down major sectors, not just electricity. And take a look at what Wit and Royalty says. Full support. Health workers should be exempt, though. Let others strike on their behalf while they continue to render essential services. Don't cut electricity too. So those are two sectors this user has identified. The masses and not the politicians suffer as a result of this.
Okay, Onajite, with loads of numbers, says, I'm in support of what they are doing now, only they started it late. Political elites are insensitive to the hardship Nigerians are going through. Look at the salaries and bonuses they take home. Not talking about gifts to themselves, shut down the country until they answer. That's pro-Labour. They do whatever it is to make sure they respond and respond well.
We're still taking comments. Khadija Garba says, are we supposed to be in support of a government that has been unprovokingly reversing and removing all the subsidies put in effect to make life livable for the masses? There's a heartbreak emoji then. But this user thinks something quite interesting. This country has money. FG can pay a reasonable minimum wage and still not go broke or die. Okay. By the way, those are some of the things we'll be diving into this morning. Where will the government get that money from? Because it looks like a lot of people say that money is there.
All right, Smiling to me says there's no institution more important than the stomach. If the stomach of poor Nigerians are closed, everything should as well.
And this final one from Mr. Eldorado. It's sort of picturing an Eldorado here, saying, let the strike continue. That's not the Eldorado part. Yes, 495,000 naira may be outrageous, but any amount below 200,000 naira won't be appropriate considering the harsh economy. So that for some people might be Eldorado. 200,000 naira.
Yeah, so the dynamics here is that when you look at the salaries and bonuses of lawmakers at the federal level, at the state level, and even people in the council, as much as the local government has been bastardized by the state government in most states, look at how much politicians go on with. When Labour sees that, it's just like your dad is dressing in all the designer suits, buying all the big cars, and he can't pay your school fees.
Come on.
That is exactly what Labour is saying. So, Daddy, cut down on your luxury life and give me some good education.
Some semblance of life.
Also joins NLC TUC Nationwide, J4B says, nice to see ASU to stand up to the shoulder with Nigerian Labour Congress in a resounding nationwide strike. The echoes of their unified demand for change reverberates through the empty classrooms and deserted campuses, a powerful testament to their unwavering resolve.
And Meet Sunshine May says, this strike should ground this government until it comes to term with reality and do the bidding of the people. I think democracy should be about the people and nothing short of that. And the debate has been, do you, what do you do to the head to, or do you cut the head to fix the headache? Or in this case, do you bite the nose to spite the head? But whatever, let's move on with this one.
All right, AJ Philly _ says, I hope FG and Labour can quickly come to a compromise in favor of all civil servants. You don't want to keep students idle for too long. That's a candid advice. I totally agree.
There you go. There's a lot more on this one, but I think we should talk about this, the money part, because at the heart of this is money.
Yeah.
Labor's sticking to the 400,000 naira range.
Over 400,000.
Yeah, the 400,000 naira plus range. Federal government is sticking to the below 100,000 naira range. So what is at the heart of this? It is money. And this user, Morris _Monye, says this about the 400,000 naira plus proposal by Labour, saying NLC asking for 400,000 naira minimum wage is unrealistic. Let's tell ourselves the truth. Can any of you, and this is talking to Nigerians, can any of you pay your gate man, cleaner, etc. 400,000 naira monthly? Ends by saying 100,000 naira is more realistic as a minimum wage, and everyone must abide by it, including you reading this tweet. That's very direct.
You know, at the end of the day, even the government itself fails in their commitment to the civil servants, because we know there are states that don't pay even the 30,000, which is also part of the argument. that if you want them to increase this money, the ones that can't pay 30,000, how are they going to match up?
I saw a quote or a post on X, and I can't remember the user saying, so when the federal government removed subsidy and the price of things went up, nobody asked, where will Nigerians get money from to afford these things, right? So now that they're trying to increase minimum wage, why are you asking where will the government get money from? I know it's a very interesting way to think, but that is a Nigerian saying his or her mind there.
So let's go on now. Mayowa Olagunju says, those who argue that reaching the 400,000 naira milestone is unattainable are a true cause of Nigeria's problems. The increase in petrol price from 184 to 850 per litre was not unusual, right? According to what you wrote here. The rise in the price of a bag of rice from 25,000 to 80K was not unexpected. It was not unreasonable for energy tariffs to increase by more than 200%. 200%. So that is a strong argument. And when you remove subsidy, you told the Naira, your mates are out there, go and fight it out and measure up. The Naira went and is on a cascade down below, So nobody said anything. So now that we're asking for an increase to match up, so this argument, I'm sure that the SGF, the Tripartite Committee, will have to be argued. Perhaps that's why they need a whole week to analyze this. But the other big argument is the fact that Labour did good analytics to say this is how we arrived here.
To that figure.
We haven't seen from the federal government how you arrived at 60,000 naira. Maybe that will help your case. All right?
So,
bless me for real. Okay, that's for you.
We need to think outside the box on this one. So let's take that one. Bliss me for real, actually. Says, well, they are aware if they start negotiating with 100,000, government might beat it down to 50,000 naira, probably. So that's the thinking behind negotiation, particularly if you go well in the market. So with that in mind, they're starting with 400. So when negotiation begins, it might be between 80 to 100, maybe 150. Okay.
Say Nigerian mothers were pricing.
Yes, my brother.
So in this particular market experience, the Nigerian mother is the federal government. You come with 600,000 and say, can't you do it for 2.5?
Nigerian mothers are legends in that one, absolutely.
All right, do we have more time for more?
Oh, yes, I think we should talk about the other one which we mentioned, Heritage Bank.
Okay, exactly. So CBN has actually revoked the license of Heritage Bank, and they've been trying to, work on the financial fortune of the bank, but it hasn't worked out, according to them. So they had to invoke Section 12 of the Banking and Other Financial Institutions Act 2020, which allows them to do that when it's a threat to their own financial stability and all of that. Yeah. But this is what you're saying. Andy Bear says, what becomes of the depositors' funds? That's why we have NDIC as a liquidator. They're on it already. Well, I'm going to ensure everyone gets all their funds, or will NDIC pay only the insured amount? While I appreciate CBN's oversight, info like the above will go a long way to calming nerves and helping people know how to relate with these banks. So NDIC, this is their responsibility to make sure that your money is safe.
Yeah, and I think some information has been put out. If you're a customer of the bank, do let us know what kind of carry along you're getting in this sense. This other user, K975, also shares the same thought, say, but we're back to the liquidation era. That's how this user starts. Very, very sad. The signs have been there for years. It says that Sanusi made us believe that no customer will suffer. Now, every shaky bank will experience a run. Now, could add to that the recapitalization move as well. Yep. So perhaps we might see a string of this, maybe not. Maybe we'll see mergers. We'll see in the coming days.
Okay, Obima Victory says, how do customers get their funds back as soon as possible? Central Bank, that's tweeting at them. Okay, posting at them. Businesses and many will suffer from this action. At least a warning could have been sent out for a few days, enabling customers to withdraw their funds. It's so annoying. Well, we've said NDIC and all of that, that's their job, to make sure depositors' funds are protected. So if you have any issue, you could go to the depositor, go to your bank. I'm sure that the CBN will be able to respond. Kyle, you have the last one.
And I understand that NDIC has begun verification, payment of insured deposits to the customers. But if you're a customer, let us know how that process is going. But take a look at what this next user has to say, and that will be AA Yusufu. Yeah, it says, this will send, and I imagine you're saying, shockwaves across the banking sector. A lot of customers will enter panic mode. I think the CBN should have a redesign of strategy that will ensure smooth transitions in the event like this. And that's why the announcement was made, because there are laws guiding the operations, and that's what the law says. If action is taken, it must be announced, and the actions that will follow, particularly from the NDIC and the rest. So let us know again if you're a customer.
So that's it. We'll have the conversation in just a moment. Join us again.
Indeed, an evidently difficult time in the nation's history, as strikes always are, with many sectors affected: education, health, air travel, you name it. But indeed, negotiations must hold, and indeed they are continuing. So we're staying with the nationwide strike and how negotiations are going and how it affects you. So as we start off this conversation, joining us to help us understand what the issues are is Comrade Emmanuel Jaja. He's the first deputy president of ATSAN. ATSAN is the Association of Air Travel Transport Services Senior Staff Association of Nigeria. Comrade, you're welcome to the program.
Good morning.
First of all, of course, I would like to feel your pulse as far as the commitment of ATSAN to the strike is concerned. But also, how are you receiving news about how negotiations are going with the federal government, between Labour, the federal government, and the others in the tripartite committee?
Thank you very much. Well, the negotiation is going on at the moment, even as of yesterday, but we shouldn't have gotten to this level, because this committee was set up since January, and we're in the month of June. So if the government are sincere, by now would have wrapped it up. So I don't know why they wait till this last minute. And I'm a labor man. Usually strike is not an option for us. We are not happy. Like yesterday, the whole place was shut down. Come to the airport, people who are going there, their normal businesses, they were shut down, they couldn't go, people on medical and all sort of things. I mean, it doesn't speak well as a nation. So we are not happy doing it, but we have been pushed to the wall and we have no option than to react. Besides, over the time, a lot of people have been saying Labour has compromised. They just call every time they make noise. So they are seeing Labour as toothless bulldog. So for once, let us just do it. We're not happy doing it, but we have no option.
But with the federal government now saying that negotiations will go on for the next few days, for them to commit to some amount above 60,000 naira, does it demonstrate some form of a commitment from the federal government, and does it give hope to Labour?
Well, the president intervened and said he's ready. If you look at the commitment, he says he's ready to pay more than 60,000. The question is, when the government want to buy SUVs, how long does it take them to get approval? Where did they get the money? Before we realize it's there. If anything, would government want to do anything, how do they raise the money? So we are watching. We don't want the country to be in a collapse system. That was why our principal in Abuja, they have to, enter into an agreement. But we are calling on the National Executive Council of the two labor centers, the TUC and the NLC, by 9 a.m. this morning. And because even our principal, they don't have too much power. It is only the National Executive Council that can give them the authority to see where we go from there. So at the moment, we'll see what happens from there.
So basically, you have a meeting today by 9 a.m.?
Absolutely.
Because Mr. Joe Ajero said I was going to get back to organs of labor immediately. A lot of people thought it was going to be yesterday, and then the strike will be called off yesterday, but the meeting will happen 9 a.m. today, and we'll get the outcome of it. So stay with us, we'll give you more updates on that. But what we saw playing out at the airport yesterday was sad to see, really. Gates shut, people who had, as you said, some business, some medical, different reasons for traveling. And air travel these times is not the cheapest, it's very expensive. So for someone to opt for air travel, it means that it's obviously something important. But as you said, a lot of people could not fly. And is that still the case today?
At the moment, I think the gate is still locked. Before the commencement of the strike, the union has written to all the airlines, informing them. So where things are working well, they're supposed to have informed their passengers that due to XYZ, there will be no flight this morning or going forward till further notice. They're supposed to inform their passengers.
So nobody's flying, and I understand you're going to the international wing today. Is that correct? So will there be international flights today as well?
Well, as at the time, as at late Sunday, when we took decision to embark on this strike, we take the cognizance that some aircraft are already airborne coming from outside the country. So we can't stop them not to land because it's an international thing. There's a bilateral agreement, so we can't stop them. So what we said is we'll allow all the international flights to land and the passengers will disembark and, find their levels. But boarding may be a little bit difficult. We plan to go to international today. We're also considering that it is not an easy thing to do to stop an international flight because some of them may be going for medical and some of them will be going for one reason or the other. So we have taken all this into consideration. But luckily with the meeting they held yesterday, we are watching till 9 o'clock and see what comes off.
I just want to see if we can put a cost to it. I remember in 2012, during that Occupy Nigeria strike, after the 8-day strike, the Bureau of Statistics put out figures as to how much Nigeria lost in the 8-day strike. That was over 200 billion naira. If you do the math, that's about 25 billion naira daily in 2012. The price of petrol then was below 100. In fact, the strike was because government was trying to push it above 100. Naira to dollar was just less than 200 in 2012. So do the math in terms of inflation, forex, the price of petrol today, just how much would have been lost yesterday. In terms for the aviation sector particularly, do you have a sense, just so that we can paint the picture properly and help us know what we're losing if this thing lingers, do you have a sense of just how much was lost? I imagine an average ticket will be, 100,000 plus naira or thereabouts. Do you have a sense of how much people lost yesterday?
Well, the government is aware that whenever there is strike, that there will be one lost hour and so many things people will lose, both sides. The government has lose. The people that are running the airlines, the airline operators, they lose. People going on their own business, they also lose. So the government is aware, and that was why it is not always good for labor to go on strike. And in the course of our training, we are told that strike is the last option. And that was why we have been making sure that this strike doesn't come. Like I said, I'm also in Nigeria. I feel the pain. It took me time to address some passengers yesterday because I feel their pain. And I pleaded to them that it is not intentional. We didn't just get up one day and say, we want to shut down. Of what use is it for labor? We are part and parcel of this country. But when the government is adamant in some of the things they're supposed to do, it pushes us to the wall. And labor is the only mouthpiece of an ordinary man on the street. That was why I know that a lot of things has gone down yesterday, but I think the early they tried to sort it out, the better. Because if you look at like you said, the high cost of inflation today, the dollar rate, exchange rate, and all sort of things has made life so difficult for an ordinary man. So it's pretty difficult. So I think the government should come up with something, so that the labor will also look at it and see where we go from there.
And speaking of what the government is coming up with, government has in fact said that they have a package, to cushion the current economic hardship as a result of the minimum wage. Government has talked about the economic package for big manufacturing businesses and nano businesses, distribution of 25,000 naira each, the resumption of that program for 25 million Nigerians. The government has also talked about quite a number of other measures that I cannot immediately remember now. How reassuring is that for organized labor, and indeed, especially federal workers who are also benefiting from the wage award that government has also implemented ahead of these negotiations? How reassuring is this, and how honest is it also? Because that's also a very critical question, because people are asking, those who are benefiting from the social investment program, where are they? So,
well, talk is cheap. We'll keep on saying we will do this, we will do this. Implementation is where the problem lies. And in this country, I have seen a lot of things that government has said, we want to do this, we want to do this, we want to do that, and it never come to pass. Because, like I said from my prologue, if the government had been sincere when they tell you they want to do this and they do it, I don't think there will be any problem. Because we'll say, okay, after all, they promised this. Giving palliative 25,000, whatever, after some time you withdraw, does it solve any problem? The answer is no. We are going back to status quo. We are discussing now, look at the prices of even ordinary gari, that is common granite. The other day I was passing along the road, a bottle of granite is almost 3,000 naira in Nigeria. Are we importing it? The answer is no. So you see that the very time that the government keep giving all these promises, and they renege from the promise, it affects us. And when it affects labor, it affects our family. Every Nigerian worker has about 10 or 12 people behind him. The wife is there, the children is there. Now, let me even come with the 60,000 they're talking. What can 60,000 do at the moment with this economic crisis? With a man, with a wife and 2 children. I don't even want to go with normal, a man and a wife and 4 children. What can 60,000 do? He will buy fuel. Maybe he has a better price, my neighbor generator. How much is fuel now? He goes to market to buy a cup of gari, I'm not even talking about rice, a cup of gari, how much is it? So when you put all these things vis-a-vis, you see that the ordinary man suffers most. My question is, the National Assembly, all these people, do they go to market? That's my question. I want to find out. Oh. And if they go to market, how do they feel?
That is absolutely a valid question, and except they don't stay here, imagine they maybe go to the market by proxy. So it's important to drive this point home. But just by the way, some would ask, why would a minimum wage earner have 4 children? If you know that you're not earning as you ought to, why have 4 children? Now that is by the way. I don't know if you're factoring that in, that an average minimum wage earner should not have 4 children.
Well, I don't know how old you are, but this is what we met, that an average Nigerian worker, you are supposed to have a wife and 4 children. That's what the government has been taking care of all along. But event has overtaken that now, because if you have a minimum wage of 30,000 and 60,000 and you want to have 4 children, To God be the glory. I wish he or she luck. I wish him luck.
Well, away from that part of the conversation now, let's look at the amount. As a Labour leader, I wonder if you're aware of the proposition that perhaps Labour is saying that if government can raise the bar a little bit to 100,000 naira, then they would be willing. Would that not be too much of a huge compromise as against what they're publicly, proclaiming to stand for, which is 497,000 naira?
Well, if you look at from the beginning, Labour analyzed where they get to 615. And during the course of negotiation, you see them coming down till we get to 4, where we are at the moment. Now, what the Labour is asking government, with the 60,000 you are proposing, tell us what it is, how you arrive at 60,000. That's what we want to know. And as at this moment, nobody has been able to give us the answer.
But is it true that Labour is willing to compromise and accept 100,000 naira?
Nobody, we don't know whether it's 100,000. They said they're coming up with something, so we're waiting. We're waiting to see. And like I said, if the president has said that he's ready to pay more than 60,000, so we are watching to see what will come out of it.
So there are signals that we're getting from the government. I don't know how Labour is interpreting those signals, because I was watching them in the room yesterday with the SGF. On one hand, Labour said, we'll give you a deadline to do the needful. They did not do the needful in Labour's view. The next thing that happened was that the AGF released a statement citing a lot of laws, including the ones that is in pendency that has not been put aside in terms of the interim injunction in 2023. On the other hand, the police IGP also said, government has said this is illegal, abide by the rule of law. Next moment, we saw the Minister of Information saying, appealing to the labor unions, as well as the Minister of State for Labour. So does Labour see what is going on from the government end as conflicting signal? And how do you perceive that to affect negotiations going forward?
Over the years, when you talk about illegality, over the years, we all are Nigerians. We've been privileged to see sometimes when courts will issue some interim injunction to government and whatever, and government renege. So I don't know what is illegality in this business. As long as I'm concerned, as long as we know, the Labour have the right, when they get to a certain stage, they have the right to protest. They have the right to go on strike. It's not Nigerian Labour, this is ILO, International Labour Organization. We have the right to do that. So issue of whether it's illegal or not legal, I think when you go to that stage, the legal luminary will handle that.
So there's a question on my mind I need to put across to you. I can almost guarantee, and a lot of Nigerians who have watched trends can guarantee, based on the 30,000 naira minimum wage that was agreed, the last one, some state governments are not paying. Till tomorrow, they're not paying. So whatever the outcome of this meeting will be, whether it's 100, 80, 150, whatever, based on trend, we can guarantee that some state government will still not be able to pay or not be willing to pay. So are we not going to be running through that cycle again?
The answer is they are not willing to pay. There is no state government in Nigeria that cannot pay. Have you heard that any state governor did not get his salary? Have you heard it before? I'm just asking. Have you heard any state governor that has never gotten salary? It's just they are not willing. And you know this greed thing that is a Nigerian thing. They don't want to pay.
So the reason I asked that question, I have a bit of data off the cuff. Bayelsa, for instance, is over 90% dependent on federal allocation. Benue, the biggest money coming to Benue State as at the last count, comes from FAC and AIDS. Their IGR is abysmal in the numbers. Maybe it has improved. We can go across the country to see that without FAC, most of this state government cannot pay. So, which is why I'm going to ask again, are you seeing this possibility at all?
If the government is sincere, both from the federal and state, they can be able to pay. Now, the question I ask again, when it is time for the federal government to buy SUVs, I heard that one is 160 million. How did they raise the money? Where did the money come from? And how long did they take the negotiation? Even when the Nigerian people are panicking, why must you buy this car for one person? Why must you spend this money? Before we realize it has taken effect. So why is it when it comes to the one that concerns an ordinary man, it's become difficult? Don't you think that something is fishy?
Well, let's just, for the benefit of Nigerians, take a look at what was signed yesterday. Not as definitive as you'll expect, but here's the agreement that was reached between government and labor. There you go. So it essentially says that, one, the president is committed to a national minimum wage that is higher than 60,000 naira. The Tripartite Committee will meet every day. Labor in deference to the high esteem of the president and the rest in above undertakes to convene what it calls a meeting of its organs immediately, which will happen by 9 a.m. today. We understand to consider this commitment. No worker will be victimized as a result of industrial action. And this is where the rubber meets the road, and Jeffrey already talked about. By the way, that statement, I should say, was signed for the federal government by the Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris, the Minister of State for Labor and Employment, Honorable Onyejiocha, and for organized labor, the President of the NLC, Joe Ajero, TUC, Festus Osifo. People have asked, why didn't the representative of state government, or why didn't someone say for state government, put pen to paper? So we have other parties that are meant to be in this negotiation, state and the private sector. Some have said private sector, some of them, majority of them pay above the minimum wage. You can either confirm or deny that, particularly for your sector. But what is expected for the private sector as well in all of this?
Well, the private sectors, to the best of my knowledge, some of them pay above minimum wage. That's not an issue. But when this kind of thing happens, what we expect is consequential adjustment to their pay for them to add something. Okay, on the issue of states, the two labor centers, the Nigerian Labor Congress and the Trade Union Congress, in all the 36 states, we have what we call state councils. So the TUC president and NLC president supersede. In this meeting that is coming up by 9 o'clock, which is National Executive Council, all the state council is involved in the meeting. So they will be briefed. They will be briefed. So the state council, as long as labor is concerned, is captured in this signing, and this because we gave them the mandate for the meeting to sign on behalf of labor, and we signed that so that we move Nigeria forward. To tell you that we are not greedy. If you see the negotiation, you can see that labor is moving. To tell you that negotiation is not sacrosanct. We keep on moving.
So if the government offers 70,000 naira, which is above the 60,000 naira, which, in fact, let me say 65,000 naira, because they just said we'll do above 60. Will this strike continue?
Let's get there, because, like I said, talk is cheap. What we want, explanation we want that we have not gotten even up till this time, even at the rate of 60,000. How did you arrive at that? 70,000, how did you arrive at that? We want to see what will happen.
Back to Jeffrey's point, which is critical about states' ability or inability to pay. But more important than that is the position of the state labor leaders to be able to prevail upon the state governors to pay. From the standpoint of a labor leader, what can you say about the efficacy of the leadership of the state chapters of the congresses to hold subnationals to account to pay the minimum wage?
They have the mandate to do that from the labor center. It is when the state fails, over the time you can hear that there are some states that labor picketed because they were unable to pay 30,000 in the past. You have heard that severally. So the state council have the right to negotiate or to tell the government of the state that this is what has been signed, starting from the level point of view, from the federal point of view down to state. So the labor council, state labor councils have the right to.
But they've been unable to execute this mandate even for 30,000 minimum wage. So can we expect anything from them for anything above 30,000 naira? And you know, this is also against the backdrop of reports that state Congress chairmen have been known to compromise, or if not, being held at the chokehold of the state governors.
Well, you know, it's usually said that the state council have been compromised, but the thing is, I don't know if there's any evidence to that, but to the best of my knowledge, like I said, in this National Executive Council meeting coming, all the state council will be involved, because we're going to do the Zoom meeting. They'll be involved. We ask questions, and usually when we do our National Executive Council, all states bring their reports. And it is when they bring the report that the national will also say which state is paying this, which state is not paying that. Issue of compromise by state, I cannot stand here and say I know anything about that.
Or what about the issue of being held at the chokehold of governors?
Well, I do not know. Sincerely, I will stop what I know.
So at the end of the day, let's look at a bit of scenario planning.
Right.
So I'm sure that Labour has something on their mind. Let's, for the benefit of an argument, government refused to shift ground despite their agreement. Then what?
If the government refused to shift ground, what that means is they want the status quo to remain. And what is the status quo? To still keep this country in darkness, to still keep this country in this kind of quagmire we find ourselves now. And I think that the government, they are part and parcel of Nigerians. They saw what happened yesterday. Like I said, it is not the will of Labour to shut down the economy. What do we gain? The government has lost millions yesterday. So also private people have also lost. So it is not the will of Labour to shut down. But the very moment they do the needful, we move. We call it negotiation. And what we sent was proposal. Proposal is supposed to be coming from both sides. You give me your own, I give you mine. So at the time, we must get a point that each party will say, okay, if we have gotten to this point, let us see how we move forward. It's negotiation.
Indeed, Comrade Jaja, this is not the not the best time to be a Labour leader, and it's a Herculean task that is before the state and the national Labour leaders. And we wish you all of the best as you continue with these negotiations towards economic liberation, or the best form of it for Nigerian workers. I want to thank you very much. Comrade Jaja Emmanuel is the first National Deputy President, Air Transport Services Senior Staff Association of Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time on the program.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And we're staying with this matter because it's that important, and we'll continue with it as we examine the legal implications of Labour's action or federal government's action or inaction. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this break.
The legal angle to all of this. It's been a long, winding battle, it would seem. Some say it's even less at this point. But let's get the thoughts of Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Femi Falana, who joins us virtually on the program. Good morning, Mr. Falana. Welcome to the Morning Brief.
Good morning.
I know you've been following this, perhaps impacted as well, in terms of the aviation sector, power. Even the judiciary, we understand, has been affected by all of this. The federal government called Labour back, and they had some sort of negotiation yesterday. They came out with an agreement. How much or how far do you see that agreement pushing the needle, at least in favor of a resolution?
Well, I have seen the document being paraded as an agreement. It is not an agreement, but an intention to agree on the national minimum wage. And what the government did yesterday was to say, yes, we are dropping the idea of giving you or paying you 47,000 naira. We are dropping the idea of even 50,000. We'll now go beyond.
Well, there you go. We'll, of course, get Mr. Falana back. He will just unmute, and then we'll continue with this conversation. Okay, please go ahead.
And the labor unions have not had an agreement. So there is a move, there is an offer by the government. And labor unions are going to meet this money to consider the agreement, I mean the understanding, i.e. the government is now prepared to offer more than 60,000. What do we do at this stage? And I think they will go back to their constituencies this morning and then decide on the way forward. There's not an agreement yet that will lead to immediate suspension or call off of the strike. That will have taken place in the night. But now they want to report back to the unions that declare the strike. That is my understanding.
Let's go back to, because sometimes I don't just like watching the end. I like to watch the process. One of the first shots that was fired before Labour embarked on this strike came from the Attorney General, citing a lot of, cases in the past and even dependency of that interim injunction. Literally looking like it is some way of saying you may bear the consequence of this action you're about to take. What do you make of the AGF's position in the midst of a negotiation?
Well, the labor unions, the two labor centers, sent the letter to me. Over the weekend. I received a copy of the letter, and my initial reaction was to ask the labor union, are you prepared for the strike? And they told me they were prepared. A strike in certain circumstances is like a coup. Once the coup succeeds, there's nothing you can do about it. But if it fails, the penalty is very clear. And that is why, in the understanding reached last night, there is a clause that nobody will be penalized as a result of this strike. Now, coming to the law, there is no court order today that relates to the ongoing strike. When the federal government went to court a few months ago, the issue of minimum wage was not on the table. So the court could not have anticipated that there would be a strike over the minimum wage. The labor leaders, neither Osifo nor Ijero, thought we would get to this level because the national minimum wage of 2019 has a 5-year lifespan. Section 3 of the law says this particular wage, national minimum wage, shall be paid for 5 years. So the National Minimum Wage Act, as I did point out yesterday, expired last month. Why did the government allow the expiration? So if the tripartite committee that was set up had concluded its work, by now the National Assembly should have enacted a new National Minimum Wage Act. And this strike would have been unnecessary. So when you are talking about law, today there is no court order against this particular strike. Secondly, when the Learned Attorney General by giving a 15-day notice, again, as the labor leaders, this is what the government is saying. And they say, but you are our lawyers. Anytime we are giving the government notice, adequate notice, what has been the effect? They will rush to the National Industrial Court, get an ex parte order to restrain us from proceeding on strike. If we went on strike, we would then be accused of contempt of court. This was why this time around, we were mobilizing our members. Government knew we were mobilizing our members. At the end of the day, we said we were going on strike. So government didn't have the opportunity over the weekend to rush to the National Industrial Court. And for me, it's a lesson for the government that when next time the labor says we're going on strike, the government will have to rush back to the drawing table. And this will have happened over the weekend. Now let me also say furthermore, the penalty, I've looked at the law, I've looked at the Trade Union Act, I've looked at the provisions of the Trade Dispute Act. In the case of ASU and the federal government and ASU, the federal government dragged ASU to court during the last strike. And the president of the National Industrial Court, the Honorable Justice Benedict Kanye, ruled in line with Section 43 of the Trade Dispute Act that if a worker goes on a strike in Nigeria, whether legal or illegal, as the government is saying, the penalty is the loss of your salary and allowances during the period of the strike. So all the government can say this time around, for those of you on strike, if the strike lasts 2-3 days or a week, you will not be paid your salary. That's what the law is saying. But the government has already captured that by saying, we're not going to penalize you for going on strike because it's a legitimate strike.
All right.
The court, in line with Section 16 of the Constitution, this is the position of the law. Because you can't say you cannot go on strike at the same time you say I didn't give you a notice. If I cannot go on strike, why do I need to give you a notice then?
All right, Leonard. All right, Leonard, still referring to the Attorney General's position, let's go back to the June 2015 agreement. In that 15-point agreement, there was a commitment by the federal government for the development of a new minimum wage within 1 month of the date of the signing of the agreement. But indeed, we have moved past that date. It's been 11 months, in fact, 1 year already. But in the last point of that agreement, which is number 15, it says the memorandum shall be filed with the relevant court of competent jurisdiction within 1 week as consent judgment by the federal government. What does this mean, Leonard Silk, for this current strike?
Not only the labor leaders, apart from the labor leaders, the lawyers also signed the agreement. The Honorable Attorney General endorsed the agreement. I endorsed the agreement on behalf of the labor unions. But we had already entered, we ought to have entered it into a judgment. But for reasons best known to the government, after we had signed, the government refused to have it listed so that the court will make it the final judgment. Again, as I said, the government was buying time to tie the hands of labor. Just like yesterday, we have this interim order that shall not go on strike. But that matter has ended. We are then ordered by that agreement conclude negotiations on the new national minimum wage. The government has, as usual, treated that provision.
A very important aspect of the conversation.
With contempt. Believe it will happen to us. And that is why you have this strike. The strike would have been unnecessary. Totally unnecessary. If that agreement had been honored by the government.
So, Leonard Silk, should the federal government present this point in court, flowing from what the Attorney General has said about this strike being illegal, would Labour also be presenting the federal government's failure to commit to the other aspects of the agreement? And we've had cause to interview some Labour leaders in the very recent past who say that a number of items on this 15-point list, the federal government has failed to meet them.
You see, the government is advised to learn to comply with agreements, freely enter into, with labor unions, with ASU and others. The last strike by ASU that lasted 8 months has to do with the failure of the government of Nigeria since about 2013 to comply with an agreement. So this time around, the government should draw some lesson from this unnecessary pain that this strike has caused the country and our people. And then speedily comply with all pending, all outstanding agreements with labor, so that this will not be a recurring exercise. Workers are very reluctant to go on strike because it costs a lot to mobilize members, to get them prepared for a strike. In the middle of the strike, the government will then come in to show some good faith. An agreement is signed, and once the strike is called off, the government simply goes to sleep. I heard you earlier, some people cannot pay 30,000 naira. This shouldn't be coming from the government, because that is an admission of illegality. The duty of the government is to enforce the law. And once you have a duty to enforce the law, you cannot come out and say, if we have a new agreement, if we have a new minimum wage act, some state governments will not pay. A government should not say that. To say some people are going to breach the law and we are going to allow them. No. Once a new agreement is codified, once a new agreement, a new minimum wage becomes the law of the country, right, the federal government has a duty, the Attorney General of the country has a duty to drag any state government that does not pay to court. I mean, the Attorney General just filed a new case, which is a good development, by saying over the years we have accused state governments of diverting money meant for local governments. The federal government has now gone to court because there is a crisis in town. So the government is compelled to go to the Supreme Court. Please, we want the state government to pay to the state local government account the money meant for local government, so that from there, the money is then distributed to each of the local government, and not cornered by some governors. So, and in this case again, if any state does not comply with the new minimum wage act, the federal government has a duty, the Attorney General has a duty to drag such a government to the National Industrial Court, because there are decisions to the effect.
Well, Mr. Falana,
the employer of labor must pay the prevailing minimum wage in the country, and that is the case of Apampa and your state government. So right. I don't see any argument in that.
Well, so let's just break it down. So on the one hand, states that are not paying the previous 30,000 naira are clearly breaking the law, and they are liable to any punishment that the Constitution or the courts decide on this one. That's on the one hand. I think that's...
Yes.
That's on the one hand, fantastic. On the second hand is this. I'd like to take you back to the 2000s. Then President Olusegun Obasanjo, there was a conversation around the new minimum wage, and it was sort of agreed upon. But what we had was the governor of Lagos at that time, who is now the president, Bola Tinubu, saying to President Olusegun Obasanjo then that you do not have a right to dictate to me what I will pay my workers because you did not engage them for me. And I imagine you remember that back and forth. And of course, that battle has lingered ever since. So did he have a right to say that under the Constitution at that point? Because some governors might also try to replay that script and say, well, federal government does not have a right because you didn't engage my workers for me. Mr. Falana.
Well, the then governor of Lagos State, incidentally the current president, was made to realize at that material time in the 20. No, assembly to prescribe, to enact a law for a new minimum wage. It's not one of those areas. It's not in the concurrent list. It is in the exclusive legislative list of the Constitution. So that argument was defeated then, and it is going to be defeated this time around if any state government raises the argument. And again, as I said repeatedly, the people are running the country now. We'll have to be prepared for governance. Even within the ambit of the
Looks like the connection is playing a fast one on us this morning while we're discussing this.
In all capitalism, the United States of America,
Mr. Falana, pardon me. So we lost a huge part of some of the points you were making. In fact, when you were speaking to what the former governor of Lagos State said then, and this point you were making, the connection froze on us. So if you could just, for the benefit of those who didn't get it, do a quick recap, please. I'm
submitting that when Governor, now President Bola Tinubu, made that point, it was pointed out to him that under the Constitution, trade union, labor matters are in the exclusive legislative list. Therefore, once the National Assembly enacts a minimum wage in the country, no state government, no employer of labor can say, oh, we are running a federalism, therefore I am going to pay what I like. And the then governor of Lagos State, now President Bola Tinubu, agree with the position of the law and ensure that Lagos State government paid the minimum wage prescribed by the National Assembly. The same argument any governor said this time around, we are not going to pay, will be confronted with the clear and unambiguous provision of the Constitution. That is the law in Nigeria. And again, as I said earlier, any state government or any employer of labor that does not pay the national minimum wage, we have agreed this time. I'm talking of our law firm and the labor unions, and we're not going to allow non-payment of wages this time around. They will be dragged to court, and we're going to ensure that the law is complied with, including the fact that we'll be praying the court to make an order deducting what belongs to workers monthly from the source in Abuja. We cannot go on like this. Allowing people swear to an oath on the day of their inauguration to comply with the Constitution and all other laws in the country. To then say when it comes to the interest of workers, we are not going to pay. There is no state in Nigeria today that cannot pay more than the minimum wage, because the government removed fuel subsidy last year and told Nigerians, President Tinubu, that the money made from that policy shall be.
Oh dear. Boy.
We use the money to live a prodigal life, as it is the case today.
All right, let us say, okay, if I may throw in this question, because we're having technical connection issues from there. What if government fails and labor decides to, go on strike? And sometimes we see what government can do in terms of using legislation. Can government stop labor from going on strike? And what should be the premise?
The government cannot stop labor from going on strike. In any country, you cannot stop a people from demanding from the government what belongs to them. The government may rush to court to get a temporary court order. Once that case is concluded, labor has the right to embark on a strike. And I have read the letter of the Honorable Attorney General. Laws cited were enacted under a military junta. So a lot of those provisions are no longer in consonance with the provisions of the Constitution, particularly Chapter 4, that guarantees the right of workers to belong to trade unions of their choice for the protection of their interest. So if we're embarking on a protest to protect our economic interests and to make a point that starvation wages can no longer be paid in the country, you cannot say that is an illegal act.
Right. Well, Senior Advocate, quite a number of issues really, and I wonder if this also concerns essential services, hospitals, The power sector, because the power was cut as well. Some have even added aviation. Should they be included in that strike as well, as we're seeing?
Yes. Unfortunately, again, as I said, this strike ought to have been prevented. Apart from the provisions of the law, we also signed an agreement to the effect that within a month, that was last year, all negotiations regarding the minimum wage will be concluded. So we shouldn't have this strike. Unfortunately, the biting effect of the strike was fed by Nigerians.
Right.
And as usual, by the poor, much more than the rich. And I am conscious, and I'm aware that that will be seriously considered by the labor leaders this morning during their meeting. But the governors, even from their members who expressed concern with respect.
Well, we can't say the connection has gone on strike, shall we?
Maybe if the strike is going to continue, there may be certain exceptions.
Right.
But I'm aware that this matter will be seriously considered during the meeting this month.
Well, Senior Advocate, we're grateful we're able to have you in spite of the connection challenges. Thank you so much for your time. We've been speaking with Mr. Femi Falana, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, a man who is well aware of the interplay between government, labor, and not forget the private sector as well. They're also involved in this back and forth. Thank you so much for your time. Learn Seal.
Thank you very much. The internet connection challenge was from your end. Thank you.
We'll take this to court, Senior Advocate. We have to sort this out because we have impeccable internet. Well, we'll go to break now, and when we return, we'll talk about the economy of this. So, can they pay, can they not pay? Where will they get the money from? We're digging deep into the budget, ladies and gentlemen, to see where that money will come from. So stay with us.
There's a lot that involves economics when it comes to wage increase. That's why we're being joined in the program from our Abuja studios by the Executive Director, Data Fights Foundation, Mr. Joshua Olufemi. Mr. Olufemi, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
From your analytics that we're privy to, we saw that between 2019, which the minimum wage was agreed at 30,000 to now, inflation has gone up about 200%. And by your estimation, the right thing to do should be over 100,000 naira at least as minimum wage in this conversation. Maybe you help us break it further down on how you came about these numbers.
Okay, thank you. Typically, as you would see in sometimes, for instance, the United Kingdom, annually you look at the inflation rate and then you use that to revise your minimum wage or your minimum wage, as it were. And if you look at the 2019 value, which was 30,000 naira, and you look at the inflation, annual inflation figure for 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, you will see that by now we will be playing around between 80,000 and 102,000 naira, for each year. For instance, in 2020, the inflation, had gone up to 11.4 from 2019, 11.4, and that would have, increased the value of the minimum wage to about 33,000 naira. By 2020, moved up to 13.25, which meant that it will have gone up to 44,000. And if you, roll it down, by 2023, it had gone up to 24.66, which meant that at that point in time, you should be paying about 76,000 naira. If you look at the Q1 inflation figure, which is 33.69, and you use that, to do the calculation or revise, you will see that we should be having about 102,000 naira as the minimum wage at the moment. So it's just a function of looking at what the figure is year on year, but multiplied by, the ratio of the inflation every other year, and then you have the figure that we are speaking to. And, that is something that I feel has been the the sentiment that you have out there saying between 100 and 150,000 naira is what you should be having.
But even in the light of the circumstances, I wonder if you think that 100,000 naira will be ideal for a family of, you know, an average family of 4. That was one of the arguments that we started having at the beginning of the program. In the light of the increase in the pump price of petrol, which doesn't seem to be, you know, relenting.
So it depends on how you're looking at it. I mean, following the conversation that, you know, Kayode was making the other time, if you have a family of, you know, 6, you know, the couple and the 4 children, you may say that's not a good figure to work with. But if you then look at, you know, on a daily rate, how much will 100,000 plus make for a 22-day walk, you see that you're playing with around 4,500 a day, which is something that you would say might be, you know, what you can live with. There is what, I mean, in normative economics, you would say what should be or what ought to be, and there is what, you know, in, you know, real economics, or if you like, you know, what should really be. What should really be, you know, based on inflation is what we said is 102. If we're going by the sentiment, and even initial analysis that DataFight had done, we had said it should be about 464 if we were looking at the GNI per capita of Nigeria, which essentially was what we saw that an extra 30,000 was added to by the, you know, by the Labour Congress to say we want 494, which was very close to what, you know, nations, if you look at our, you know, GNI, which is our gross national, you know, input, you will see that you should be around 330 to 450,000 naira is what you would, by our productivity as a country, you should be looking at. However, what you should look at is federal government is only employing less than 2% of the entire population. And some of the conversation we've already had before, even the 30,000 states are unable to pay because they are not generating the level of output, if you like, that, you know, the whole economy is generating, you know, and all that put together would then be why you feel like, okay, if you've had this level of inflation, you can or could, you know, have an affordability within 100 and 150,000 naira.
Okay, so we seem to have come up with at least a round figure on this side of the divide. But on the other side of the divide, and I'm talking the governments, federal and state, they are sticking to plus 60,000 naira. And plus 60,000 naira is very tricky because 61,000 naira is plus 60,000 naira. 65 is, well, 100 is and the rest. But it looks like they are dragging their feet when it comes to obviously reaching this minimum wage that labor and, well, economists have come up with. So the question is, why are they doing that? Is it as a result of them not having money to pay? A lot of people will say no, because they've seen how governments spend money. I mean, the labor leader we had here talked about the SUVs, the lifestyle, and all of that. So for a lot of people, the answer is a clear no. But that's why we brought you. You see the figures, you see what the budget says, what is appropriated for salaries, how much we can accommodate, where we can get money from. So we want to play around with the scenarios this morning and say, if we were to say 100,000 naira or plus that, where will government get the money from?
I mean, I think I lean more to people saying government is able to pay. If you look at the 2024 budget, the entire personnel cost was put at about 7 trillion naira. But if you zero down on just salaries and wages, that was about 4 trillion naira. And going by what the Minister of Information and National Orientation had said, that to pay 494,000 naira would mean that the government will be will have a wage bill of about 9.5 trillion. Now play the midpoint. The midpoint of that would mean that with 100 and 120,000 naira, the federal government will probably just need about 1 trillion naira extra on salaries and wages to be able to match its bill. Now, where can you get that from? If you look through the budget, 2 scenarios can play out here, or 3 even. First one would be, do you want to groom your deficits, or do you want to groom your, debt repayment and, negotiate with, those your creditors and say, how about we not, we reducing what we are paying this year by a trillion naira? That's not a good one to do, because you're also thinking of sustainability. The other way is to look at your contingency funds, what you have within the service-wide vote and all the other things that government had already, included in the 2024 budget. For instance, just looking at the service-wide vote by the Federal Ministry of Budget and National Planning, you see that there is already about 200 billion naira, stock for capital project contingency. That's something that you can explore. You also have, some other things that if you look at even the vice president, the president, the state house, some of the expenditures that they have lined up, the renovation of, and constructions of, offices in Lagos and other places where, they operate from. If you look at all of that, I think that the federal government can still have about 1.3 trillion naira. That they can take from the 2024 budget. And the third scenario would be look at the budget implementation, scenario. As of today, I'm not sure that federal government has spent 50% of what it set out to spend, which means if you have not spent 50% and you're already in June and you're looking at making up for extra maybe 500 to 600 billion naira, you have you have a runway, or that is enough for you to survive for the rest of the year. I think that there is information out there that the president himself is already saying he wants to go, back to the National Assembly and present a supplementary budget. So I don't think that there's a problem with paying if you look at differentials.
All right, Femi, we're going to come back to you to look at the variables in that argument and what should hold true. But I want to touch base with some of our correspondents who are following up on day 2 of this industrial action by the labor unions. First up, we'll head to Kano State to speak with our correspondent, Sadiq Ilyasu. Sadiq, maybe you help us, bring us up to speed. I can see where you are, literally no vehicles, so the city is dry, but you are in a better position to tell us what's going on in Kano.
Well, it's actually not that dry. I'm actually standing away from the street, the actual street. You can show them the street. You can see a lot of people moving around. Normal activities are going on. But that doesn't mean that the strike doesn't affect the activities in the state. Since yesterday, a lot of banks have shut down. Offices, the secretariat also shut down. No worker at all there. And only a few banks, let me just say one bank that was operating, and the members of the union went there and they ensured that they shut it down. However, the private schools, most of the private schools in the state are actually working. And you remember last week, we had a lot of crises with regards to Emiash's sector, and the council has completely shifted its activities to the court. But unfortunately, yesterday we were expecting to see the court, especially the Federal High Court, speak on the case, but due to this desperate action, it didn't happen. And even today, as I'm telling you, we are expected to have an event at the government house, which the governor is going to post a lot of people on education. But because of the industrial strike that affected the domestic flight in the country, the government has to postpone the activity. Even the governor, as of now, is in Abuja because he doesn't have a flight to fly down Kano, the event is imposed. So this is the situation now in Kano about that.
All right, Sadiq, thank you for your reporting. Whatever development comes up, we'll touch base with you. That's our correspondent, Sadiq Ilyasu, reporting from Kano State. Let's head back to Abuja studio now. To Mr. Joshua. Joshua, I wanted to bring to the fore some of the argument or the variables in the argument and what you should speak to. Some have argued that if labor is paid what they're asking for, it will cripple the economy. Others are arguing that affordability and sustainability should be a factor. Labor is arguing about economic reality. Others are also pushing that it's going to push inflationary numbers even higher. So where should we be looking at when we consider all of these variables to see how we can come to some level of agreement that will not make labor continue in their hardship, as they say, and government to suffer the impact of not being able to pay?
So essentially, there is, all the facts are historical, facts always show that when you increase the minimum wage beyond, the average, it will always translate to some kind of inflationary effect, right? But you're already in a situation where, the headline inflation, the core inflation, the food inflation is quite high already. I think we already have a year-on-year food inflation that is over 14.6%, which means that, the price of most things are already tripled. And if you're looking at that, which is one of the reasons why we said, look at something that is almost three times or 4 times what you already have. So if you pay people about 120 to 150 minimum wage now, for the people who work with government and with the assumption that the state and, the private sector are also able to match up with it, I think you have something that you can say is fair. In terms of sustainability, I think you then need to look at various global variables. You always know that the volatility of the oil price will always impact, the revenue of government in Nigeria, which then has a spiral effect on the its fiscal policies, and also its monetary policy. The other is also to look at, the realism of any value that the labor is asking for. If you're asking for 494 for minimum wage, it means that if you go 3, 4, 5 steps higher for everyday person, there is 3, 4, 5 levels in even in the federal civil service or even in the state civil service, the value is not going to be, I don't see any state government being able to pay realistically, this figure. Even Lagos State will have to struggle through it. However, whatever it's set, I guess the most important thing is for every tier of government to pay attention to productivity. How do we ensure that you are not just paid this minimum wage as civil servants, but you're also contributing to productivity? How many of the ministries and departments and agencies of government really bring back money is another question to really ask. And so for me, I guess the fair value or the realistic value is between 150 to 200. Depending on who is calculating.
Well, you perhaps partly answered the question I was going to ask, which is the state's ability to pay. For instance, Kaduna State, as at 2021, its wage bill was 498 billion naira. And, Jeffrey took us through earlier how some states are dependent on federal government allocation by about 90%. So if, for instance, federal government approved 100 billion naira, where are you looking at in terms of IGR or other forms of revenue of the states to be able to afford this the new minimum wage?
I guess it would be a call for, for revenue drive for state government who, of course, because the minimum wage, that the current minimum wage is very convenient for anyone to pay, which then allows them to do all the, other lavish spending that is being done. I guess this will, bring back the question of what are the resources that you have that you're not exploring? What are your comparative advantage in terms of natural resources, services that you should be able to offer that you're not offering? I'll give you an example of some of the states that have, like Kaduna that you were mentioning. There are a lot of natural resources that I think can be, you can do a lot of fiscal and monetary policy mix to help you generate 2x what you're having. And I think if you take that to other what I like to call the K-state, Kogi State, Katsina State, Kano State, these are states that, by the resources that they have, are able to generate more than what they're generating, but have been, comfortable because the minimum wage favors them, or all their wage bill is something that they can handle even with FARC. as it were. There are states, you know, in the country that are practically not doing anything in terms of resources. That even tax revenue drive is really, really, nothing to write home about. I feel if you increase this, it brings, you know, it makes the work of every governor or even the local government councillor. It gives them a reason to demand the right revenue, and you always know that the higher the minimum wage, the higher the income, the higher the taxes that government is also able to collect, you know, across sectors, both public and private sector.
You know, some would say, you know, in these parts that fingers are not equal. So we have Edo State, for instance, already paying 70,000 naira. So after we get past this negotiation, do you see a variation in what states will be able to pay eventually?
Absolutely. I mean, even from what they already generate, you will know that many of them can meet up. But the question will be, how do you want to? Where do you want to go from that point, right? If Edo State is already paying 70, like as you mentioned, it means it will be easier for Edo State, you know, to match 100,000 compared to a state that is struggling to pay 30,000. You know, even just doubling your wage bill means that you also need to double, you know, all these streams or outlets where you make money from. And that's, I mean, I feel like all fingers are not equal, which means you will probably need to do much more than what you're already doing to make money.
Mr. Joshua Olufemi, thank you so much. Joshua Olufemi is the Executive Director, Data Fight Foundation, joining us from Abuja studios. We'll always come to you when we have to make sense of all of these numbers, because at the end of the day, we're looking for a way to move the economy forward. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Okay, it appears we need to touch base with some other correspondent on this particular issue.
And River State is not just about political drama. It's also affected by this strike. And we have our correspondent, Deborah Agbalama, joining us live to give us an update. Deborah, we understand that public offices, even schools, the airport were affected. What is the case today, Deborah?
Good morning, Kayode and the rest of the team. It's the same. Yesterday, actually, there was actually partial compliance, but today it looks like it's way better. The places have rolled today. Everywhere is locked. Where I'm standing right now is where the avenue is more like filled with banks. There are about 7 banks in this particular spot I'm standing, and they're all non-functional. The one right behind me, actually yesterday had more like partial compliance. Looks like their staff, members of staff were allowed to come to work. But even though I see cars parked outside, I have not seen any movement since I've been standing here for over 20 minutes, which means that perhaps maybe they came earlier and they parked their cars, but I haven't seen anybody going in and out like yesterday. You know, yesterday was tough for the NLC team because places where they went to, like the NDDC premises, SPDC premises, they had to ask everybody to leave at some point because there was actually partial compliance yesterday. But today, looks like everywhere is quiet. We don't know how long this will last, but we have got to meet at the round table and have this discussion again because it's not going to be funny. People, like yesterday, the banks had people piled up outside, those banks that are compliant, and they were saying that this thing took them all of a sudden. They did not have pre-knowledge was going to happen. They were hoping the meeting on Sunday night was going to be fruitful. So here we are. Compliance is very high in Port Harcourt today.
Are you hearing anything, Deborah, by any chance, from any of the labor leaders about the strike and how it will continue or not? Okay. Yeah, their stance is still the same. I spoke with some of their ESCOs yesterday because I was with their team when they went on their monitoring inspection for compliance. And this morning, too, I also spoke with 2 of them, the person in charge of Pengasin here, and as well as the secretary of NLC in River State. And it's still the same. They are not going to back down until the federal government vetoes their demands, which we all know what they're demanding. You know, they're saying the minimum wage that they're offering
It's nothing to write home about, and that can't even afford a rich man's lunch in a fancy restaurant, you know, and so cannot also take care of any workers' welfare. And they're also insisting that the tariff of electricity is very high and should drop low, whether by A, B, or Z.
And just before we let you go, Deborah, what about citizens of Port Harcourt themselves, particularly the real sector? Have they been out during the strike?
Well, yesterday, everything looked like normal because junctions were piled up with taxis. But today, maybe because it's early in the morning, we're going to watch and see. But yesterday, aside from the fact that you noticed that some places were locked, on the streets was normal. There was even a little bit of traffic yesterday evening. So one would ask, are you sure there are people are not going to work early and then closing later on in the evening and going home? Because it didn't seem like the environment was affected. Everything was normal. There was enough vehicular movement at the junctions and all. So I don't know what to say, but compliance in terms of the public and the private places being locked, yes. But we would notice, we would check today whether it should be the same what happened yesterday will happen today again. But yesterday, everywhere was normal. There was enough traffic and everything.
All right, Deborah, maybe let's add to that list. I don't know whether you've observed secondary school, because we saw a statement from WAEC saying that children or students should not be casualty of industrial dispute between labor and the federal government. Are you seeing anything happening in schools, like they are going to write exams based on the release we saw just yesterday, or you've not observed?
Okay, well, because it's way early when I came out, the schools resume at 8. I'm going to still check that out. But yesterday, some of the schools, secondary schools now, they all came to school. Some of them came to school but left halfway. You know, they even had some schools had like one class and then they dismissed the students. I'm going to still go around to check whether there's compliance on that. Because I don't know how visible that would be if the schools are not opened and WAEC is going on to organize that exam in Nigeria. I don't know where that leaves the students participating from Nigeria.
Definitely
really
very, very tricky times. But I'm curious what the state government is saying, because this is not just a federal government thing. The state governments also have a role to play. Edo State increased to 70,000 naira. I don't think River State has been able to match up to that point yet. But is the state governor saying anything in particular, maybe assuring workers that don't worry, if this is resolved, whatever the amount is, we'll be able to pay, or it's just some quiet from the state government?
Oh, the River State government has been quiet about it. However, it's important to note that at resumption into office, few months into resumption, he did quite a lot for civil service. There had been backlog of promotion hanging for about 8 years, and he was able to promote them, and not just that, effecting what they have lost in that 8 years. So you can imagine somebody getting like triple promotion, and it's reflecting in your pay right now. So I think the civil service is a bit happy with the governor, and there's no pressure on him at the moment. Even NLC did a solidarity march for him just a few months ago, remember? And they were saying that the governor is doing well, and they would like the federal government to replicate what the government is doing, state government is doing. So I don't know. We'll just watch. And it's also important to note that the NLC has not really matched to him to make any demand, you know? Right. They're just doing it generally. Right. You know? So the governor has been quiet about increment.
Okay, so we'll see if NLC will still be doing that solidarity march in the coming days. But we'd like to thank you so much, Deborah Agbalama. I understand that you'll be going around the city to find out what's going on. So we'll get back to you. Looks like it might rain in Port Harcourt, so of course you have your umbrella. Thank you very much, Deborah.
It's rained all night, and even this morning. Just stopped a few minutes ago.
It's not called rivers.
We have to be out there whether it's raining or it's sunny.
Absolutely. It's not called rivers for nothing. Thank you so much, Deborah.
Okay, Nicola, Geoffrey, and Kayode, you have a pleasant show.
Absolutely.
Right, thank you.
There's a lot. We'll continue to check out everywhere this is happening across the country. So, our correspondents are all over the country. So, in our subsequent programs and bulletin, from sunrise to the news to everything, we'll be following up to bring you up to speed as to what the decision. Remember, Labour will be meeting with the federal government today, tomorrow, for a week. So we don't know what will be the outcome of Labour's organs meeting, what will be whether they will call off the strike or not, we do not know. So our eyes and ears are in the direction of all the organs to see. Whatever happens, you can be sure that Channels Television will bring you up to speed. But hey, that's the program for today. Thank you so much for your time and company. I'm Jeffrey Uzoma.
And as we've reviewed the action, we hope to also review the celebration, perhaps in the coming days, perhaps before the end of the month. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back again tomorrow. I am Bukola Koka. I know these are tough times, but let's come out of this even tougher, as a people, that is, and stronger. Have a great day. I'm Kayode Fikilo. Stay with Channels Television, Sunrise Daily.